Open world is the most popular genre in video games by far, so there's no shortage of excellent open world games to dive into. But because of how crowded that space is, it also means that some real gems get lost in that crowd. Here, we'll be talking about 15 great open world games that should have gotten more attention than they did. Mad Max. Mad Max was by no means a flawless game. Issues such as how repetitive it could often get were hard to ignore. But like many Avalanche Studios titles, it was a true diamond in the rough. Not only was it a visual feast, it was also an absolute blast to play, with excellent and thrilling vehicular combat and a well-designed world. On top of all of that, it absolutely nailed the brutal, barbaric, and violent tone of the Mad Max franchise. Ryzen 3. If you're looking for an extremely polished open-world production, many aspects of Ryzen 3 will probably not sit right with you. But if all you want is a complex, large role-playing game with a rich and diverse world, there's a lot to love here. Like many other games on this list, Ryzen 3 is not without its issues, but taken as a whole, it is still a really good game that deserves far more attention than it gets. The Godfather. Taking a property as legendary as The Godfather and adapting it into a video game sounds like exactly the kind of situation that has led to many horrendously disappointing experiences. But The Godfather's 2006 game is an exception that stands out. From the way it faithfully recreated the movie's story, to how well it captured its tone and aesthetic, to the excellent open world that was just a blast to simply exist in, The Godfather was a surprisingly great game. Batman: Arkham Origins. While Rocksteady's excellent Arkham games rightly get tons of plaudits from critics and audiences alike, WB Montreal's Arkham Origins often gets sidelined, which is really unfair, because this game is every bit as good as an Arkham game should be. The story is excellent, and is backed by top-notch voice acting. It retains the Arkham game's strong traversal and combat loops, while it also features some of the best boss fights in the entire series. Dying Light. Dying Light launched in a pretty rough state when it first came out, but even then it was clear that this was a game with a lot of potential and a lot of really great ideas. Over time, Techland cleaned it up with multiple updates, and by the time that they were done, Dying Light had turned into the game that it should have been from the beginning. Its world is terrifying and exhilarating to explore. It has satisfying parkour elements, and combat only gets better and better as the game progressed. The upcoming Dying Light 2 is promising to be even better, and we cannot wait to see what Techland does with it. Just Cause 3. Avalanche Studios are true open-world connoisseurs, and Mad Max isn't the only diamond in the rough that they've made that is featured on this list. Does Just Cause 3 have issues? Yes, plenty of them. But is it a blast to play? Well, that's putting it mildly. The over-the-top action, bombastic destruction, and unbelievably enjoyable traversal that this series has always been known for are in top form in Just Cause 3. And though it can be a bumpy ride, more so on other platforms than some, it is ultimately an enjoyable experience that no fan of open-world games should miss. Sunset Overdrive. Insomniac Games didn't really have a ton of experience with open-world design until not too long ago, but playing Sunset Overdrive, you would not have believed that this was their first crack at it. This game is the very definition of underrated gem. It's got excellent traversal mechanics, thrilling combat that makes every encounter a joyride, and every inch of its world is oozing with style and personality. The Saboteur. Open-world games often tend to play things by the book. So when one comes along and tries to do things differently and actually does them well, you can't help but sit up and take notice. The Saboteur did exactly that, but sadly did not get nearly as much attention as it should have. From its unique aesthetic and art design to its rich setting to its extremely addictive open-world gameplay, The Saboteur is a game that you absolutely should not miss if you have any interest in open-world games. Sleeping Dogs. One of the games that gets brought up most often in discussions of unfairly overlooked open-world titles is Sleeping Dogs. It's pretty much a cult classic at this point. There's just so much to love about it. Its rich and vibrant open world, its brutal and punchy combat, its riveting story, its engaging progression mechanics. To call Sleeping Dogs one of the most complete and well-designed open-world games of the last decade would not be an exaggeration in the slightest. Sniper Elite 4. Sniper Elite 4 isn't exactly an open-world game. It's got a linear, mission-driven structure, but each mission puts you in large open sandboxes which are really well designed. The game's systems-driven nature makes it so that you can toy around in the environments endlessly, while its solid stealth mechanics and open-ended mission design complemented those strengths greatly as well. No, it's not exactly your typical huge open-world game, but its large sandbox maps have more than enough to keep open-world aficionados satisfied. Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. It's sad to see that Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning's strong reception among fans and critics did not lead to strong sales as well, because this is the kind of game that could have given birth to a proper series. It did not reinvent the wheel by any means, but it had a thorough understanding of what it needed to do to be a good open-world game and a good RPG. It had tons of customization options, 5 large and distinct areas to explore that were full of things to do, great combat, and a setting full of dense lore. THQ Nordic did recently purchase the property, so let's hope that we see it making a comeback not long from now. Mafia 3. Mafia 3, much like its predecessor, was something of a mixed bag, but if you could take the good with the bad, you'd be in for a memorable experience. And the thing that contributed to that the most was its story, a genuinely excellent mob story that still stands as one of the best of its kind we've ever seen in a video game. Sure, the mission design could get mundane, and yes, the world did often feel like it was needless padding, but when the game was good, it was really good. The Getaway. Of all the so-called Grand Theft Auto clones of the 2000s, and there's no shortage of those, The Getaway is probably one of the very best. But calling it a GTA clone is a bit too reductionist, because yes, it had a similar gameplay loop and similar open-world design, both of which were very well implemented. But in going for its highly stylized cinematic aesthetic, it also tried to set itself apart from the crowd, and it did so very successfully. Two Worlds 2. Two Worlds 2 certainly has a strong and dedicated fan base of its own, so it's not like there aren't people out there who don't appreciate how good it is, but it is the sort of game that deserves more of the limelight. It's a huge improvement over its predecessor, with a vast and flexible array of RPG mechanics and systems, and though some technical issues let it down, it was still a really good open-world RPG. A sequel is currently in the works, so here's hoping that's just as much of a leap forward. Gothic. Challenging and high systems driven as it is, Gothic isn't a very friendly game to newcomers. But if you invest enough time into it, you'll be rewarded with one of the most engaging and satisfying open world RPGs. This game doesn't hold your hand, and that's its biggest strength. Traversing its world always feels wrought with challenge, but completing quests in its highly interactive world is a very rewarding experience. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.